At the beginning of the film, a couple named James and Em are shown. They are vacationing in a luxury resort on an island called La Tolca. As an amateur book writer, James tries to find inspiration while on vacation there. After that, a man was seen rioting on the beach. James, who saw it, was approached by a female tourist named Gabby, who turned out that Gabby liked James's book. Together with her husband named Alban, they invited James to dinner. Although they just met, they tried to get along, and in the conversation it was discovered that Alban was an architect who had traveled to various countries. Gabby, meanwhile, is an actress who specializes in product advertising. She can't wait for James to publish his book again. The next morning, James and Em are invited to take a walk outside the resort. Seeing that the resort is fenced with iron because, according to rumors, the crime rate on La Tolca Island is quite high. But it turns out that the scenery on the island is also very beautiful. Finally, they arrived at a beach where there were no visitors. Alban tried to break the ice by inviting them to chat. After a while, night fell. James was asked to drive home because Alban was drunk. Now the road conditions are dark, and James is already sleepy, making him accidentally hit someone. Afraid of being arrested by the police, especially because they were only tourists, they finally decided to leave. James looks very guilty about what just happened. In the morning, James, who woke up in the room, was awaited by the police. Not talking much, he and Em were immediately taken to the La Tolca police headquarters. While there, James and Em were forcibly placed in separate prisons. Then came a detective named Thresh, who explained that James had hit a farmer last night to death. On the island of La Tolca, there is a rule where anyone who is proven to have killed will be sentenced to death, which will be carried out by the son or daughter of the victim. However, there is another way that James can avoid execution, namely that he will be made a clone, and the clone will replace him when he is executed later. Although confused by this method, James, who had no choice, finally agreed to be cloned. Then James underwent a number of preparations before the process. After everything was ready, he was told to enter a small room that had been filled with red liquid. Then we see the room flickering, as well as being shown James's memories, indicating that the cloning process is underway. After the process was complete, James finally woke up from his stupor. Together with Em, they were very surprised to see the results of James's clone, which was very similar. Now the clone will undergo the execution process, and according to the rules, the executor is the farmer's child. The child then stabbed the clone of James. After being stabbed to death, it turns out that the executed was the real James. Unbeknownst to Em, they were given the ashes of his corpse. Because of what just happened, Em decided to go home, but that couldn't be done because James's passport suddenly disappeared. Because he couldn't go home, James booked a room for a few days because he knew that the resort would be closed next week because the rainy season had come. Gabby then tried to engage James in conversation. James was told that Gabby and Alban were the designers of the resort, but due to a problem they underwent a clone process, and the original was executed long ago. James is invited to meet Gabby's friends, who consist of two married couples, Charles and Bex. They are all tourists who have been cloned because they have committed crimes in the past. Now they are happy to have another member of the clone community and celebrate a little. But suddenly Charles finds out that James has lost his passport. He will help, but the condition is that James must come to kill the owner of the resort. He is the one who got them all into trouble and is now a clone. Because of the threat, James was forced to obey. Before the action, they took several masks so that their identities were not discovered. After they arrived at the resort owner's house, one guard was easily taken down. Meanwhile, the owner and a comfort woman were eventually found and wiped out. According to the purpose of this activity, Gabby also told James to kill the owner. Getting the order, James clearly refused, but apparently there was still one more guard, and there was a bit of a shootout that made Alban's leg hit by a shot. After the incident, they took Alban to James's room, where Em was shocked to see her husband hanging out with strangers. The next day they are finally caught and will be executed for killing someone. They look relaxed because they will definitely be cloned before being executed, but the fun is gone because Detective Thresh will directly execute them without the cloning process, because this group has often caused trouble. What a surprise as they were successfully cloned again and watched the execution with glee. Now 2 James had been executed, But when they returned, they saw M, who decided to go home alone. M, who didn't know that he was a clone, was angry that James had joined the group of killers. After that, guilt is seen in James even though he has been masked because he has disappointed M. But there is still Gabby's group who will always accompany James while on the island. James, who has no one else, is invited by Gabby to use hallucinatory potions from traditional ingredients on the island of La Tolca. James is now influenced by this group and does not hesitate to cause trouble. Charles informs that James's passport is being held up by Detective Thresh, who refuses to sign the document. Together with Alban and Charles, they went to the hospital to kidnap Detective Thresh, who was rumored to be having a medical checkup. They easily managed to kidnap him and get out of there. With the hallucination potion, James was asked to beat up Thresh. We can see James, who was originally a good guy, turned into an evil figure because of promiscuity. But what a surprise James was because he had beaten up his other clone. He was in shock, and Gabby told him that they had asked Detective Thresh to make another clone to prank James. James, fed up, finds his passport hidden in the toilet. Now he realizes that his passport has been stolen by Gabby's group from the start. He immediately got on the bus to go to the airport. However, the plan had to fail because on the way, Gabby caught up with him and stopped the bus. James was not allowed to leave because the group still needed his help. Because he was cornered, James finally surrendered. On her way back to the resort, Gabby exposes her crime because from the beginning she was not a fan of James's book at all. Instead, during the accident, Alban deliberately did not drive hoping that James would hit someone. The rebellious James manages to run into the forest, but Gabby, who shoots randomly, manages to hit James's leg. Even so, James was still able to run, and with his wounded state, he arrived at a farm. There were 2 residents who saw him and quickly helped James. James woke up on the farm, but it seemed that the conditions were very quiet without the 2 residents. When checking the situation, it turns out that Gabby's group was waiting for him in front, because all of this was planned. Surprisingly, they brought a clone of James last night, which has now been transformed into a dog. If James wants to kill him, then Gabby's group will not mess with him anymore. James, who was already upset about the concept of this clone, finally refused the order. But an accidental fight occurs. James, who is committed not to kill, beats his clone to death. As promised, they now consider James a member of their group. The next morning, James informed M that he would be returning home soon. It is recorded that during his time on this island, 3 James have been executed, 1 real and 2 clones. Gabby, Alban, and the others would also be leaving the island to return to their respective countries. They have vacationed on this island every year, and don't know how many times they have been cloned. Gabby also hopes that next year James will want to vacation again on this island and can gather again with them. Finally, the resort is shown, which has been closed due to the rainy season. But it turns out that James decided to stay there because he realized that his clone self didn't deserve to live with M, and the movie ends. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, because by subscribing you have supported me to make better videos. See you in the next video.